In the Gun, episode number 58. We've got plenty to get to on this edition of ITG. A new interim men's head basketball coach, a WVU baseball player entering a territory that no other WVU baseball player ever has. Jed starting some good conversation with a poll on Twitter. Jarrett Daggy making some waves in the Canadian Football League, and the new Big 12, which, don't look now, folks, is just literally a few hours away from being official, as we are about to welcome 4 new members as the calendar turns from June to July. Plenty to get into on this edition of ITG. I'm Wesley Uhler with the best teammates in the business. I got the signal caller, Jed Drenning. We are just a duo today, just a two-man show, as our third wheel, our dearly beloved Owen Schmitt, the Runaway beer truck. He's got some 7-on-7 camp this week for all the football coaching that he does. So you just got Jed and I here on this edition of ITG, and this episode 58, brought to you in part by our friends at Bet Online. Bet Online, your number one source for all your betting needs. You can get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. You name it, it's on Bet Online. Bet Online continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and all of your favorite casino and card games, also available right to play on your phone. So head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. And remember to use the promo code Bleav, that's BLEAV, when you sign up for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit at Bet Online, where the game starts. Jed, JJ Wetherholt, that's where I want to start here today as we go around campus a little bit before we get into some football conversation. JJ Wetherholt, of course, stud second baseman for your WVU baseball, your WVU Mountaineer baseball team, I should say, this past season. One of the best in the country. We've been saying that, and I've not just been saying that because he went to the same high school as me in Western Pennsylvania, Mars High School. I'm not just repping for a fellow planet, a fellow Martian out here. JJ had himself a fantastic season, one of the best players in college baseball, a top 5 finisher for the baseball Heisman, if you will. That's how good of a year he had. Well, get this, folks. He just became the first Mountaineer, as in the first and the only in program history, to become a unanimous All-American. What that means is there's 7 different college baseball publications that do their All-American lists. He was on all 7. First team All-American on 7 different publications. The first, the only Mountaineer in program history to ever do that. Jed, we've had some, listen, while the baseball program hasn't always been, amazing over the years, it hasn't always been, what it is right now over the years, certainly. There's still been some really good baseball players. I mean, there's been Jed Jorko and John Means and Alec Manoah and guys that have had nice careers in the major leagues, but no one has ever been a unanimous first-team All-American. Congratulations to JJ Wetherholt doing it as just a sophomore. It's uncharted territory for anyone to ever come through our baseball program. And again, it's pretty cool for me that it's a kid that went to the same high school that I did that is now at WVU.
I think I told you, Wes, that I saw a lady when we were up on vacation. We went, we were at Idlewild outside of Pittsburgh, Memorial Day weekend. And
That's
I
right.
saw
I remember you telling me this.
Wearing a Mars baseball shirt. And I was like, JJ Wetherholt.
You don't see a lot of Mars baseball shirts.
No, you don't. I can't imagine you do. It's you see more of them than you see pit hats up in southwestern Pennsylvania.
Absolutely.
But either way, uncharted waters, literally uncharted waters. No other West Virginia baseball player in history has done this. It's rare air in football, really. I mean, it's about a dozen consensus All-Americans in the history of Mountaineer football. So to be the only one, I mean, just think about that. In the annals of West Virginia baseball, you're going to be talking about JJ Wetherholt, and his story is far from over. I mean, he's already said he's coming back next year. Okay, so by the time he's done, I mean, you're going to be mentioning his name really by itself. I mean, when you talk in terms of football, we haven't had one once since Darius was a consensus in 2020. Prior to that, it had been almost 2 decades with Grant Wiley. It doesn't happen that often.
Right.
Okay?
Consensus, again, every publication.
Consensus, everybody. Not making an All-American team. It's making
in college football, it's 3 publications, Jed, is that right?
Well, again, it's different from, we talked about a couple weeks ago with the Hall of Fame selections. You have to make a first team Hall of Fame on one of the 5 accepted teams.
Okay, 5. Maybe that's
well, I'm not sure if you need all 5 to be a consensus All-American. That's a good question.
Okay,
Sure,
but where I was going with this was just, I mean,
Either way, it's not seven.
Think about that. Like, take any topic right now. Do you think ice cream is delicious? If you asked 7 people, you'd probably get one who would be like, no, not real. Like, you can't get 7 people in this country to agree on anything.
No, you can't. No,
but
you
JJ
can't.
Wetherholt got 7 different publications to agree that he's a first-team All-American. That's pretty cool. That's pretty special.
I mean, I was just reading something yesterday, and it was this food critic, and they mentioned in this thing that they don't like cinnamon rolls. And I was like, wait, what? So there's somebody out there that doesn't like cinnamon roll? Okay, anyway, to your point, right?
You can't get 7 people to agree on anything.
No, hats off to JJ. Again, exciting future for
awesome.
West Virginia baseball, obviously coming on the heels of, we don't like how it ended. Nobody does, but that's not going to take away from what was accomplished on the diamond this year for West Virginia baseball. I mean, it was an historic campaign for Randy
Jed,
Mason.
From where the program was a decade ago to be ranked in the top 10 for multiple weeks this season, to share, to win a share of the Big 12 regular season title, 3-way tie, just phenomenal. And hopefully they're going to continue and grow on that as a team and JJ as an individual. And folks, I mean, if he was because it's like college baseball is like college football. You have to be at least 3 years removed from high school before you can enter the draft. It's not like college basketball, right, where you can be one and done or anything like that.
Well, in other words, here's what happens, Wes. You can either enter the draft, or if you choose not to, then you have to be 3 years removed. You know what I'm saying?
So you can enter right out of high school.
High school kids draft,
or you have to wait 3 years. Yes, good. I'm glad you made that clarification there. So JJ has to play another year of collegiate baseball, but make no mistake about it. If he were to come out right now, he would be a first-round pick. And so if he continues to build on that next year, has another great year as a junior. I mean, he could be a top 15, top 10 pick, which is just. I would be tickled. Not only him coming from WVU, but again, the same high school as me. Like, I would just be tickled to death. I love it. He's got a lot of people in his corner, but we're certainly amongst them here on the ITG podcast. Speaking of around campus, some pretty big news as well. You might have heard of this one. Josh Eilert has been named interim head coach of the WVU men's basketball program. Took about a week, the entire process. Ren Baker doing his due diligence, in-house candidates, other candidates around collegiate hoops, even someone like John Beilein, who has a huge body of work, but is not currently employed as a head coach. Jed, they end up going with Josh, a guy who has been with the program for a long time, a guy who has waited for his opportunity, and a guy who now I think is going to get a pretty darn good opportunity to jump right in with a solid roster. Now, there's some guys in the portal now. There's some moving and shaking, as there always is. But that also, with that doesn't mean WVU is done adding to their roster as well, too, because that's a two-way street, right? Like, you might have some guys in the portal now. There's also all those guys in the portal that you can attempt to recruit and attract. So all the best for Josh. I hope he's able to have a great season. And it's funny. We just kind of saw this with one of our own, right, with Joe Mazzulla, where from just a pure fan standpoint, right? Like, if you're a Celtics fan, you don't love how Joe Mazzulla had to get his opportunity, right? How your coach had to have some improprieties with another, with someone within the organization, a relationship. And Joe ends up coming to an organization, a team that has a lot of expectations. He takes him to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Final. He has that interim tag taken off, and he's given the job, fully and title and all that at just age 34. It is kind of funny how, not funny, but just ironic how that situation and a Mountaineer and one of our own, and Joe Mazzulla, just going through that. There's some parallels there for Josh Eilert, an unfortunate situation that the fan base didn't want to see happen. But now, much like Joe Mazzulla, we hope he can take the reins and keep this thing humming.
Yeah, and Ren said in the press conference, he's like, look, the plan moving forward is to open this to a national search next year, but that plan can change.
Absolutely.
Right? And
I'm sure that's what the Celtics were saying a year ago at this time. Yeah,
without question. So let's look at this. Let's unpack this real quick in terms of how it unfolded. First of all, soup to nuts. It wasn't that long, like you said, 7 days or so.
A week. Yep.
So there was a lot to consider within the framework of those 7 days. Now, let's assume that maybe from the outset, irrespective of what was or wasn't said publicly, who knows what Ren was thinking in terms of, hey, I might have my guy right here internally on staff, right? And ultimately, I think I'll probably land there. It's not an optimal time in June to be conducting a coach search in men's basketball, right? You said it on the podcast when we talked about this situation, Wes. Whoever's still out there right now, and I'm sure there's some great coaches still available, but they weren't the first choices in the
Correct.
hiring cycle.
There's a reason they're still available in June.
Yeah, so they weren't the top 5 guys to go in that hiring cycle. So every year is going to generate, every hiring cycle is going to generate a new top 5, right? So there's a couple things to look at here. Maybe, in fact, Ren Baker looked at this and thought, look, it's unlikely that I'm going to get into this situation and explore things nationally and find somebody that I'm so happy about that I'm willing to sign them to a multi-year deal,
4-year deal, something like
and tie
that.
my fortunes to them.
Multi-million
more
dollars
likely
as well too.
that I'm going to look and I'm going to come back and make an internal hire. That's what's most likely. But isn't it my job, just in doing due diligence, to kick the tires and explore what might be out there? I don't know who might surprise me. I don't know if some Hall of Fame coach is willing to come out of retirement for a couple of years and take I don't know what's out there. So I got to ask. So I got to pick up the phone. I got to make this list of people say no to me. Okay. That's my job. And that's going to take a handful of days to do that. Now, once that, of its own volition, once that situation or that process resolves, then I'm going to come back, and I'm conducting interviews all through the week anyway. And I'm probably going to end up doing what maybe I anticipated to begin with. I saw some great possibilities internally. Ultimately, I'll probably end up with one of those great possibilities, but it's my job to first check. So if, in fact, I heard people saying, well, what are you waiting so long? The team's falling apart, yada, yada, yada. Look, if you had hired Josh Arlett, I don't say hired, if you had named him as the interim
right away,
8 hours, without making a phone call, without doing anything, then wouldn't the criticism have been, what are you 100%. Doing? Can't you at least check?
Ren, come on, call this guy, call that guy. Yeah.
So first of all, it was a pretty quick process when you consider everything that had to be done within the framework of time. So that played out. And then here's what I was most pleased with is in the press conference in which they made the announcement and really introduced Coach Eilert to the fans. I mean, everybody's known him. He's been part of the program for a long time, but that's the first time he got to speak in that capacity.
Sure,
there was nothing about him that wasn't impressive, right? I mean, everything he said, everything you wanted to hear. And, he's an old farm boy from the Midwest, talking about luck and talking about 2 ships passing in the night. Bob Huggins was at K-State for 1 year. Well, that was long enough to bring Josh Eilert back, right? So that's what West Virginia got out of that. So that's one thing that was nice about that press conference, was hearing from Coach Eilert, and he was saying all the things that you wanted him to say. And something else that was nice about that press conference, I think it gave people who haven't spent much time around Ren Baker an opportunity to see what Ren's all about. I mean, Ren by no means attempted to do this, but it was almost he kind of stole the press conference, right? I mean, you talk about saying and doing the right things and addressing the right questions and handling everything ideally in terms of what you're asked and your vision of what's going to happen. I thought Ren did an exceptional job. So I thought we were 2 for 2 in that presser. And you always say it's, I don't know how many games you're going to win, but you won the press conference. Well, let's start by winning the press conference, and both of them won the press conference. So now let's try and stabilize and see what happens. But in terms of the portal, I'm glad you mentioned that. Again, let's revisit how this is structured. Even though the portal window is not necessarily open, for a situation like this, like you'd like it to be, that doesn't mean there aren't X amount of kids still hovering in there that entered when it was open. Correct. And now you can draw from that reservoir of talent that's still in there. And we've had 1, if not 2 already come back. So who knows where this might go. I think you're going to see some stabilizing of the situation. And it's interesting, Wes, we're not going to get into this topic in this episode, but it's worth mentioning in passing. The NCAA is now talking about cutting the portal window in half, from 60 down to 30 days, because they're saying, like, look, the first half of that portal window is when most of the kids entered anyway. But anyways, there's going to be changing coming to the structure anyway. But like I said, nice hire under the circumstances. You like everything that Josh Eilert said. I think he's a stand-up dude. He knows the program. He knows the situation. And you know what? If he had 3 or 4 more years experience as an assistant, because he's a freshly minted assistant. He was just named as a member of the staff last season, right? Correct. But he's been part of the program in various capacities for the better part of a decade and a half. Whether it was recruiting coordinator or other roles he played. You know what that reminds me of, that resume? It's kind of the modern type of resume that when you hire a Sean McVay. I mean, those are the types of guys, the hot tickets in coaching. They start as video coordinators, then they work through maybe an assistant video coordinator, and then they're the
Right.
video manager, and then they move up to assistant scouting director, and then scouting director. They know every function of the organization,
Everything.
from
Yep.
top to bottom. So there's nothing about the inner workings of the program they don't know. That's Josh Eilert. He knows just about every part of the basketball program, and that's only going to stand to serve him well. So I think it's a good situation for West Virginia. All things considered, this could have ended much differently. So let's see what happens.
I think you're absolutely right. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and say that this is ideal or anything like that. We all know that. We wish the last few weeks hadn't transpired and Bob Huggins was getting ready to to enter the season with one of the most talented rosters he's had in a long time. But I have faith that Josh Eilert and company, along with a very solid staff that they've got in place there, can keep this thing moving and maybe even surprise us all in the process, so that we get to the end of the season and we are really saying, hey,
That's the wish list, guys. And I'm not going to discuss this now, and I don't expect you to, but a lot of Mountaineer fans will be asking themselves between now and November, before the season tips off, right? Okay, what is the threshold that he has to cross to first become a legitimate candidate to remove the tag, because he has a 10-month contract, right?
Yep.
To remove the tag and be considered the full-time coach. What makes him a candidate? What makes him a front runner? And what makes him a shoe-in? I mean, what level of success? You see what I'm saying? That's a fun
and
conversation to have with
that's
your
where I was
friends.
going too. Like, I hope by the time we get to the end of the season, we're all saying, hey, Josh, we're considering him as a long-term candidate, because that means the season was pretty successful.
Yeah.
If we finish 9th or 10th in the Big 12 and don't make the tournament, no, I don't think we'll be talking about giving him the job long term. So I hope we get to March and April and we're talking about him. Not saying like it's a guarantee or whatever, but just I hope he is legitimately in the conversation, because that would mean I think things played out better than expected this year. But all the best to Josh. Congratulations to him, his family, and let's go win some dang games. As a former head coach said, and I worked with some words there, all right, but you get what I'm saying.
You Disney-fied it.
I Disney-fied it. That's exactly right. This episode of ITG also brought to you in part by our friends at GoMart. Folks, make sure you're signing up for your GoMart rewards as you travel throughout the Mountain State and onward. GoMart, here to keep you going. Jed, before we get into this poll, and I think a really good question that you raised on our Twitter account at In the Gun Podcast just a couple days ago. All right, I got to pick your brain on this Jarrett Daggy Canadian Football League stuff. All right, because I think everyone's seen the highlight, but the highlight of, Jarrett Daggy throwing a Hail Mary at the end of the game, and it bounces around and the wide receiver catches it and goes for a touchdown, and they're calling it the something miracle up in Canada. I'm looking at this. I'm like, oh, this is great for Jarrett. This is awesome. And they still lost the game by like 10 points. So I'm like, wait a second. How are we calling this a miracle? And everyone's talking about Jarrett Daggy, and that's great. And he had a really nice game, but they still. So I know you're much more in tune to this. I'm not going to lie to any of our listeners out there. I'm not really paying attention to the Canadian Football League. All right. My life, my job, my livelihood, everything revolves around the NFL. Yeah. And WVU football is my, like, in a weird way, escape from football, because I'm just a fan and I love it and I love the program and I love the university and everything. So I'm football driven. CFL, USFL, XFL, all that stuff. I wish them well. I have no ill wishes. I just don't really follow it very much. So what's going on with Jarrett Daggy and this miracle, and maybe a little nice role that he's carved out for himself up in the Canadian Football League?
Well, I don't know if I'm going to call it a miracle. And when it comes to the CFL, I mean, I'm not averse to it. I'll watch if I have a reason. I'll pay attention if I have a reason. Like when former Mountaineers do something that flashes up there, I'll start paying a little more attention to it. Jared stepped into a situation in Edmonton with the Elks that he was actually third team prior to last week. And, this confluence of events led to a couple different things. He was backing up the starter was Taylor Cornelius. And if that name is familiar to Mountaineer fans, that's because he was the author of our nightmares in Stillwater, Oklahoma in 2018. That was the guy. Yeah, that quarterback from a fifth-year senior from Mike Gundy. Well, anyway, that's who Jarrett was backing up in Edmonton. And one thing leads to another, and they were getting knocked around by Toronto, and they were significantly behind when Jarrett got inserted. And he started, stepped in and threw an early pick six. Didn't go well for him, but Jared's always been a mentally tough kid as well as physically tough. He's resilient. He bounced right back. He has a short memory. He gets it. And he ended up stringing together a performance. I think, Wes, one of the reasons people are excited about it, it's not the situation or the context. It's just what he showed. He took an absolute shot to the chops. Okay.
Gotcha.
I mean, showed the guts of a burglar, stood tall, took the shot that most people aren't willing to take, delivered a throw that turns into a 70-yard touchdown. He ends up 9 of 11 for a $163 or so. Played very well, but I think the play was kind of the cherry on top of
Okay.
a game that was already going pretty well for the guy.
Gotcha.
And now,
That makes sense.
wow, that takes a special level of toughness to stand. That's what
Sure
those
does.
Edmonton
Yeah.
fans were looking at. So now they're looking at, we'll know this thing we're taping Thursday night. We drop on Friday. Well, Edmonton plays in Ottawa Friday evening. So,
Ooh.
there you go. I mean, he started taking first team reps on Tuesday. So it sounds like the Edmonton press believes that he's going to be the guy this week. And let's hope that's the case. But he can maybe make the most of a neat little opportunity that he has up there. And I think his skill set can fit that level of football. It used to be a more, dual threat type league.
Right.
But I think it's taken a step towards more of a pocket, push the football downfield type thing. And so anyway, he's making the most of an opportunity. We'll see what happens. We'll see if he gets the nod. But I mean, think about it. A guy who transferred,
Yeah.
not once but twice when he left here, and
Good for him.
and then things didn't go as favorably for him at Troy as he would have hoped. So he lands in the CFL, and here you go. But I wish nothing but the best for Jared Dagey. I mean, when you look at it, at all his stops, I mean, he quietly strung together a pretty impressive
Yeah.
career.
Yeah.
I mean, he had 80 some odd touchdowns. He threw for a bundle of yards. He was productive, and he played at West Virginia. We've talked about this all the live long day. He played within an offense that had some limitations, and he's the kind of guy that he's not going to erase those limitations. And sometimes he was exposed. But the one thing I consistently saw here out of Jared is the same thing I saw on that play. I mean, he will stand tall and
Yeah,
take an absolute
never quit.
pummeling
Yeah.
and create time that we shouldn't have to deliver a football on a critical third down and take a shot to the mouth and not flinch. And that's what he did here. And that's what he did on that play. So I wish him the best. But let's see how it goes. Like I said, when former Mountaineers land in prominent positions in Canada,
Absolutely.
I start paying a little more attention to those things. But
listen, I don't care what league it is. If you're a Mountaineer, we're rooting for you. We're pulling for you. We're in your corner. If it's Skylar Howard in Japan, if it's
you see
Jared
Marcus
Dake,
Sims the other night?
if it's
in the
Sims or
semifinals for the
Daggy,
XFL, Marcus Sims with the wheels,
whatever. And if it's obviously all the way up to Geno Smith, and winning comeback player of the year and everything, we support our Mountaineers at every level, and that's awesome for Daggy. I've said this before. WVU fans, it's a weird dichotomy where like our program is not Ohio State or Alabama or Georgia or Notre Dame or USC or anything like that, right? I think all of us, at least for the most part, the reasonable ones amongst us, recognize that. But man, have we been spoiled with quarterback play. I mean, you could go back Hostetler and Major Harris and Mark Bulger and Rasheed Marshall, #respect
Freddie
too.
White.
And
30-4 as a career starter.
And Pat White and even Jarrett Brown and Geno Smith. I mean, like we have been very spoiled, and Will Greer, a lot of really good quarterbacks. And I think because of that, sometimes the Daggies and the Skylar Howards of the world get crucified because they're not Geno Smith, because they're not Will Greer.
Standards a high one. Yeah.
But it is the quarterback position. It sounds crazy because again, like WVU is not some blue blood football program that's putting first round draft picks into the league every year, right? Like we're Oklahoma or Ohio State. It's impressive.
2 weeks ago, I was in a meeting, and there was a Georgia fan, a Georgia grad at the meeting, and we're sitting at lunch, a group of us, and he's talking college football, and of course he starts leaning into these references that, West Virginia is a nice program. Yeah, but I mean, come on, Georgia is. And I'm just sitting there trying to smile and grin and bear it. And I was like, I mean, you guys were 10-2 when we beat you in the Sugar Bowl. I mean, SEC champs. I couldn't help but work that in there and twist a little bit. But yeah, you were a heck of a teammate. You're 10-2. I mean, You came as close to slowing us down as anybody did.
That's right. Other than Virginia Tech, I mean, you guys gave us our
and I
best
could
test
tell
of the
by his
year.
reaction, he'd already forgotten about that.
Of course.
He'd
Of
already
course.
forgotten about it. Yeah. So
just like, it's funny, like a lot of this stuff with Trey Mitchell transferring to Kentucky this past week, like you could tell a lot of Kentucky fans already forgot that we took down their team in 2010 in the Elite Eight, the team that had 5 first-round draft picks on it, and what at the time was the most devastating loss in Kentucky basketball history. Yes, it is funny how those things work, but yeah, all the best to Jarret Doege, to Skylar Howard, to Sims, everybody. Again, if you're in the XFL, the CFL, the USFL, obviously the NFL, we wish you all the best, and we are in your corner. Jed, before we get to this poll that I've got to take for you on, I also, last kind of housekeeping thing here, we're just hours away. I mean, it's Thursday night as you and I record this, the 29th of June, so just a couple days left here in June. Jed, the new Big 12, the expanded Big 12, which will be 14 teams for just a year, obviously, until Texas and Oklahoma bolt, will be officially official on July 4th. So we're just a few hours away from welcoming Cincinnati, BYU, UCF, and Houston to the Big 12. Pretty cool. It's here. We made it.
It is. It's pretty cool. And I'm the weirdo who this time of year in the summer, I mean, of course, there's not a month throughout the course of the season that I'm not doing something on various websites from a metric standpoint, or whether it's ESPN.com, jumping in to click various things on the Big 12 section. But I couldn't help but think just a couple of days ago when I was in there, wow, it just in a couple of days, it's going to have, when you click Big 12, it's going to have 14 teams. Right now, it still has the 12. Okay. It still has the current 10. But you're going to have 14 teams here in a few days. So it's going to be neat. You're going to have the UCF, you're going to have BYU, you're going to have Cincy, you're going to have Houston. And I saw a neat tweet by Brett McMurphy. I believe we retweeted it from the ITG football account. But he said 4 schools make the jump to Power 5 on Saturday. Of course, the 4 we just named. Schools that have joined new Power 5 conferences in the past 12 years, and the number of winning records in league play since joining that current conference. And he lists all the schools that have done so in the last 12 years, from Utah on down to Rutgers. And he's looking at how many times you had a winning record in league play. Okay. Well, in the 11 years in the Big 12, West Virginia 4 times has had a winning record in league play. The best among those teams is Utah, 8 times in 12 years. And of course, Maryland is 0 for 9. Rutgers is 0 for 9. So it does make you wonder, what does the future hold for these 4? Some are going to stand out more than others, but it's an exciting time. And it was this time last year-ish, when it seemed like all was quiet on the Western Front, that UCLA and USC suddenly were headed to the Big Ten. That was right about the time coming up here in a few days when that story broke last year. So it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds. But we've learned in the last couple of years, whether it's the Oklahoma, Texas story, just when it seems like you're all settled in, you got your eyes fixed on the upcoming season, and you can actually prepare to talk about football instead of these other issues, there's going to be something breaking that you didn't see coming. That's not football on the field, but something else. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next handful of days, the next couple of weeks, we have another story. But meanwhile, this is a story unto itself. Welcome aboard to the 4 new members. And I wouldn't be surprised if we're announcing some other additions imminently here in the near future. I wouldn't be surprised at all. I'd be more surprised if we're not. So
yeah, completely agree. But welcome to our 4 new members, and then let's go fist fight out in the parking lot. All right. Yes, you get about a 10-second welcome, and then we got all 4 of you on the schedule this year. So let's bring the noise. Let's bring the ruckus. But I'm excited for these new 4 members, particularly Cincinnati and, well, I guess UCF too, at least in our own time zone. But Cincinnati, one that there's at least some, border states and some regional and some history there.
I do a media kit, Wes, each year. I've done it for the better part of the last 20 years, 15, 20 years. And it's kind of a resource. I shared it with you guys last year.
Yeah.
It's kind of a resource that includes relevant information about every team in the conference, returning personnel, coaching changes, just various things, scheduling. And again, it's been a while since I had changes this significant when usually I have a template that I draw from and I just build on that template. Well, I had to rebuild my template, you know. I mean, you're looking at a whole different Big 12 West, but so it's kind of exciting. You know,
It
let's see where
absolutely
it
is.
goes.
It absolutely is. And I agree with you. Let's see how this goes. We're going to see all 4 of these teams this year. Should be a lot of fun to kind of jump right in that regard. And Oklahoma and Texas won last hurrah here to see how that goes as well too. But yeah, July 1st, your new Big 12 is here and ready to rock and roll. All right, Jed, I've been teasing it. Let's talk about it. This poll that you put up on Twitter. This poll, of course, brought to you by our friends at Toothman Ford. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Make sure you're getting your hind parts to Grafton for all of your vehicle needs. They're doing great work with WVU NIL. Make sure you're supporting the people who support our student athletes and support us here on this podcast.
I was
Jed
there
put
tonight,
this out.
Wes, looking
Were
at
you?
some of their inventory. I was on their website and looking at some of their used inventory because I got a kid in college and it's that time of life.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm running some recon, and of course my recon is going to begin and end with J.R. Toothman, right? So JR doesn't even know this yet, but at some point he'll be hearing from me. Yeah, and there's some options on there. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just thought it was a perfect time to insert that.
No, it
Some
absolutely
options on
it
there. Yeah.
absolutely is.
Anyway,
It
proceed.
absolutely is. But Jed put this up on our Twitter account yesterday. Well, I guess it all depends on. I need to be better because it all depends on when you listen to this. On Wednesday, the 28th, Jed put this up on our Twitter account. Real simple question, but got a lot of traction, a lot of debate going, and I think I have an interesting hot take on this one.
Yep.
WVU fans, if the college football genie emerged from the bottle and granted you one of the 2 wishes, which one would you choose? A guaranteed Big 12 title or a 50-50 chance at the college football playoff title? I assume you meant making the college football playoff in that, right?
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
We'll talk about that.
Well,
if you make the playoff, that's not a 50-50 chance.
That's what I was thinking too. So is what you're saying is you're guaranteed to win a game there?
Here's what I'm saying.
Okay.
And this is where it gets interesting. You are either in the championship game, heading into a game against a team you're evenly matched against, and either team could win 50-50. Or you want to get more creative? You jump into a situation where you're playing Georgia in the national championship up by 7 with 8 minutes left. Whatever. You have a 50% chance to win it. No matter how you stack it, you have a 50% chance to win the game. Okay? You're in the game, obviously, because if you're in the playoff, it's not a 50% chance. Right now,
it's a
25%
chance.
Right?
At best,
So, yes. Now, there were some great comments made. Okay. A couple of the comments that stand out, one of them was, look, I'm a WVU fan. I have been my whole life. I know what 50-50 means. Okay. I'm taking the guarantee, right? Great point. Okay. And somebody else said, well, look, if you have a 50-50 chance to win it all, that means you're in the title game, which means you already won a game that's going to be on the short list of the greatest wins, right? So that's a terrific point. You already won a semifinal game against a great opponent, a top 4 opponent that's going to go up on the wall with the greatest wins of all time in the history of the program. So you're already in a winning situation. Even if you don't have the Big 12 title, you have that instead. In other words, TCU didn't win the Big 12 this year, but TCU was unbeaten when they lost to K-State in the Big 12 championship game. So they still, with one loss, advanced to the playoff as a non-Big 12 champ, beat Michigan. As we know, they advanced to the title game. Now, I'm not so sure TCU had a 50-50 chance to beat Georgia, losing 65-7. So that's what I'm saying. No matter how you want to stack it, get creative, think outside the box. Either heading into the title game, you're faced against somebody. Think Ohio State 2007. I think that would have been a great 50-50 matchup had West Virginia advanced to play Ohio State in the 2007 national championship game, right? That's a 50-50 type game, that matchup that year against that Ohio State team. So either you have something like that, or let's jump ahead in the game. If you find yourself against Georgia, if you find yourself against Alabama or whatever heavy hitter, 800-pound gorilla, you're up by 7 with 8 minutes to go. You have a 50% chance to win that game, 10 minutes to go with the ball, whatever. However you want to stack it, you have a 50% chance to win the national title. So do you take that, or do you take the guarantee of a Big 12 title and a trophy on your mantle?
All right.
in your
So
chosen
see
state.
the way now that you've broken it down, you've kind of changed my mind because when I
Okay.
just originally saw you post this poll and we had no real discussion about this until
No.
you and I hit record here and started this,
Yep.
I thought you just meant that it means you're in the college football national championship game, not that it's 6 minutes left, 7 minutes left, 8 minutes
Whatever.
left, and it's a tie game in the fourth quarter.
It might
Because
be
those
if you're
those
against an
to
evenly
me,
matched
those
team.
to me are different propositions. When I first saw, I was one of the few people, only 23% of people, who when I first saw this, my gut reaction was, I want the Big 12 title. And I'll explain myself from this standpoint. Like, I know making the college football playoff should have been my answer because that's where you want to be. You want to have a shot. You want to be in the tournament, right? You're down to the Final Four. I mean, you win 2 games and you're immortalized forever. I looked at it more, though, from the cynical standpoint of, are many people going to remember that TCU went to the national championship game this year? Are many people going to remember that Cincinnati was in the college
No,
football
but you know what they're
playoff
going
a
to
couple
remember?
years ago?
Those are two different things. They're going to remember TCU beat Michigan.
See, I think TCU fans will, but nobody else.
I don't know. See, Cincinnati didn't win a game.
They didn't, but those were kind of my two. Like, Washington has made the college football playoff before. Did it really mean that much to them? You're right. You're right.
If you win a game, that's different.
TCU will be the litmus test for that, but I don't think people really give TCU credit for winning that game. I think they say, Michigan blew it and Michigan shot themselves in the foot, and TCU, people make that excuse.
I don't think they'll say that in 10 years. I think they'll remember that TCU had a win.
I hope you're right, because again, in theory, it should be an easy answer. But for me, like, I don't look at the college football playoff the same way I look at the Final Four. Like, making the college football playoff is not as big of a deal as because you had to win 4 games to get to the Final Four, right?
Yeah.
So just when I first saw this and I figured, okay, guaranteed Big 12 title or a chance, right? I want banners, I want rings, I want trophies, I want things that last forever, and a major conference football like. Jed, it's only been a year and a few months. You know how much freaking mileage Pitt has gotten off of winning an ACC championship?
Wait, here's what I'll say.
I mean, that's all they talk about. That's all they use.
Here's the analogy that I'll draw.
ACC champion won the ACC championship game.
Yes.
I walk through the practice facility all the time, and there's that huge 2022 ACC champions banner or whatever it is. Like, I want the banner, I want the rings, I want the trophy.
All 6 of their fans will talk about it for years, but here's the difference.
Okay? 2 dozen fans.
Okay, 2 dozen fans. In other words, as we head not just in the era of a 14 playoff, but especially when we head to a 12-team
playoff.
Then
I'm totally on board.
What I'm saying is even the 14 has changed everything. So when we beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, when we blew the doors off Clemson in the Orange Bowl, those were all pre-14 playoff games. Okay,
and they mattered a lot more. I think the major bowl games mattered a lot more back then.
If you're winning those games in the 14 playoff era, they don't mean nearly as much.
Completely agree.
New version of beating Georgia in the Sugar Bowl, of blowing Clemson out in the Orange Bowl, is beating Michigan in the semifinal game.
That's
the new version of that in terms of landmark wins in your program's history. And that's going to become more true as you expand beyond 4 to 12. The new version of beating Oklahoma in the Fiesta Bowl, that's not going to exist anymore. Instead, it's going to be going on the road and upsetting Oregon at Alton Stadium in the first round of the playoff. That's going to be the new version.
And I completely agree. Completely agree. But does that mean more than to be able to bring your recruits in the facility and you've got your Big 12 championship trophy sitting right there that them and their whole family? I don't know if it does. I don't know.
Well, I think it does. I think because they're watching those games.
Like, we're all different. I don't know if TCU recruits are going to be, what was it? Was it the Orange Bowl that they beat Michigan in? Is that what it actually was?
It was the semifinal game. That's my point.
I know, but I don't know how much gravitas. That's my only thing is I don't know how much people it's one of the things that we've talked a lot how much college football has changed over the last few years, right? Yeah. One of the things that I hate the most is that now, like with the invention of the college football playoff, with the introduction of the college football playoff, no one gives a crap about the bowl games. And I'm talking from a national perspective about the bowl. Unless you win the whole thing, no one cares that you won the Rose Bowl or the Fiesta Bowl anymore. Your fan base does.
It used to be.
But from a national perspective, it's win the national. It's like turned into the NFL, right? Like just win the championship, or we don't care.
That's right. Those games used to be the ultimate goal. But now, like I said, I don't even necessarily pay attention to what bowl the semifinal was. It's the semifinal.
And again, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying to us, it would mean a lot. if we went to the college football playoff and we beat Michigan or Ohio State or USC or LSU or whoever in the semifinal game, that would mean, I mean, it'd be incredible for our fan base. But I don't know if it would have the same gravitas for everybody else as of here's our Big 12 trophy. You know what I mean? That, and
Well,
again, I could be
use
completely wrong. That was just my gut
I'll tell you who
reaction.
used to use that angle, that approach to build a program. It was Bill Snyder. In other words, when you think of the old Big 12 when there were divisions, okay, Bill Snyder was trying to go from one of the worst programs in the country to build towards something. Now, long before he could battle his way all the way to winning a Big 12 championship game and hanging that banner in his locker room and showing that trophy to recruits, you know what he was able to do? Win a Big 12 North trophy or banner. Yeah. So now he was the champion of something. And so,
and that's Pitt again. Pitt does that same. Oh, we've been 2-time Coastal Division champions, and you know that I walk past the banners not every day. And
I'm not so sure how fooled recruits are by winning a watered down division in a watered down league. I really don't.
Recruits like to have trophies to take pictures of with their family to put on their Instagram.
And you got to, you know.
You do, but I don't know if, you know, the Fiesta Bowl trophy means as much as a conference. I could be completely wrong. But I don't know if a Fiesta Bowl trophy anymore means as much as it does as a conference title to a recruit.
What's 50-50?
I think that's where
a 50% chance to
Chad,
win
if you're telling me we're playing Georgia or Alabama or something, and it's a tie game with 7 minutes left, and we have the football, here's what I'm telling you, I'm taking that.
I'm telling you, it's either a pick'em game going in. It's not a 14-point line.
It's not TCU and Georgia.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you as I said in the poll, you have a 50-50 chance to win. Not an appearance in the Big 12 title game. You have a 50-50 chance to win the title game. That's what you have.
Yeah. No, I'm taking that. Again, like I said, I'm going back to my initial, like the way you broke it down when we started this conversation. There's only one answer. It's the 50-50 shot at the title. But I just,
some people would still say otherwise.
Yeah, maybe, but I wouldn't at least. But for me, it's like, let me ask you this season for WVU basketball, okay?
Yeah.
Would you rather go to the Sweet 16 and lose, or would you rather win the Big 12 tournament?
Well, no, wait a minute. Would you rather go to the Sweet 16 or the Elite Eight or Final Four?
Final Four, I don't see. I'm leaving because Final Four is celebrated in college basketball. You get a trophy; it's a huge deal. Would you? Okay, so let's say, would you rather go to the Elite Eight, or would you rather win the? Would you rather win the Big 12 tournament?
Yes.
See, I'd rather win the Big 12 tournament. No one. I mean, that's a trophy. That's a banner forever. Well, and I know we have Elite Eight banners in the Coliseum, but to win. It's like winning the SEC in football. Like to win the Big 12 in basketball to me would mean more than a Sweet 16 or not a Final Four. But
I see that argument, but basketball is analogous, to be honest with you.
I don't think it is. It's not. I'm comparing apples to oranges.
There's some parallels there, but the Final Four is a different animal. It's almost like the Final
that's
Four
no doubt
championship game. Okay, and that's what I'm saying. And TCU spent that week and a half going into the championship game. Okay, as one of 2 teams left standing in all the land after beating Michigan. And what I would argue, nobody really remembers other than, hey, Georgia did something to beat the daylights out of, TCU.
Right.
The game that people remember in the postseason, I would argue, name a game other than TCU beating Michigan.
Well, I thought the Georgia Ohio State semifinal
was a great
game was great
too.
Ohio
State wins, they win the national championship.
I agree.
But I think the game that people remember most is most likely because of the shock factor, because it was an upset, because of the nature of it, because they persevered and kept punching and Michigan just didn't have an answer. For all these reasons, I think TCU, that game was one that people, it would certainly be one of the two. Yeah, you're right. The Ohio State game against Georgia is up there too. But it would certainly be one of those 2 games that people are going to remember. They're going to remember both those games more than the championship game. And TCU prevailed in one of those 2 games.
And that's where, too, I mean, is the way you laid it out. If it's a true 50-50 shot, it's not a you're a 3-score
Well, and then
underdog.
there's a school of thought that says, look, anytime you line up in a football game, you got a 50% chance to win. There's that line of thinking, right? So
Listen, if we're playing Georgia, I don't think right now, I don't think we have a 50% chance to win, but I absolutely get what you're saying.
See what I'm saying.
And that's kind of, again, that's kind of what, like, this past year I was thinking TCU, right, or Kansas State. Like that, when I first saw this poll, it was, do I want to be TCU or do I want to be Kansas State? And again, I'm sure there's a lot of people that would call me an idiot, and I probably am an idiot, but I might go Kansas State, because to me, the Big 12 trophy and the Big 12 banner has more gravitas than the Fiesta Bowl or whatever it was that Michigan win. As a fan, the Michigan win would mean more to me, but I'm talking from a global perspective.
Here's the other silver lining. It's not necessarily mutually exclusive. It doesn't have to be TCU or Kansas State. Sure, what if you had a scenario in which K-State had one loss going into that game and wins? Now you're the Big 12 champ. And in other words, I'd argue that,
and that's what a lot of people said in the mentions too.
You win the big, but you're not in the championship game. You're in the 14 playoff.
Right.
Which isn't as big a deal, because nobody remembers the teams that get knocked out quickly in the first round. They remember the teams that survive and advance. That's the difference. Nobody remembers Washington. Nobody remembers Cincinnati. Nobody remembers
Michigan State
like that. There you go. But you could be K-State with the trophy and advance with some chance to maybe win that first game and get to the, you know what I mean?
You win the Big 12, you win your first game, and then you're right in it for the national championship game. That's the dream. That's the dream scenario.
Yeah. So
I tell you what, you elicited some good response on Twitter there. I like it. We had a lot of people chiming in on that one in the mentions.
Yeah. And there's no wrong answer. Obviously, there's no wrong answer. I mean, how can you not want to have some kind of significant hardware in your, trophy case to show off to recruits? And you know what? I tell you what, we just mentioned the fact we've had 4 winning records in league play in 11 years. Well, at least you'd have that, all the live long day forever and ever. You'd have that Big 12 trophy,
Regardless of what you vote here, it's going to be the best season we've had in a decade. So I think any of us would take it.
And it could be one of those, you could take it one of two directions. You could say, well, hey, what if it's a year? I would argue you're going to have a fair to middling chance as the Big 12 champ to go to a 14 playoff.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay? Yeah.
Now, 12
particularly
teams
going forward.
Something's wrong if you win the Big 12, you're not in a 12 team, right? Something's very wrong. Okay. But we're talking really 14. So you could go one of two ways. What if you win the Big 12 and you're not K-State? So you get your cake and eat it too. You're advancing. You're a 12-1 Big 12 champ. All right. And you're advancing to the playoff with a chance to win that first round game. Or what if it's a sagging year in the Big 12 and there really isn't a dominant team, and you pull an upset at 9-3 and you're 10-3? All right. So let's say Kansas State beat somebody instead of TCU, who was unbeaten. Let's say they beat another 9-3 team. Now you're not going to any playoff. I promise you that.
No, you certainly aren't.
In the 12-team playoff, this is a whole different conversation, because you win the Big 12, you're in.
Right.
You're in questions asked for bigger
and you're getting a bye. You're getting a bye too, right? If you win your conference.
Most likely, unless something's really wrong, right?
Yeah.
Unless something's really wrong. But
interesting. That was a good one by you. 23% of people 23.5% said Big 12 title, 76.5% said 50-50 chance.
I probably should have found brevity's the soul of all wit, right? But as Shakespeare would say, but it's difficult to explain in that much detail that boring the daylights or breaks off of people in a Twitter poll. I just try to be as straightforward as possible, especially, I don't know if you guys out there and gals have ever put together a Twitter poll, but you have 25 characters to list those answers.
You don't have much.
Very brief, straightforward. I was like 50-50. You have a 50-50 chance to win. This isn't appearance. This is a 50-50 chance to win.
Everyone in their right mind is taking that the way that you've laid it out now. Yeah.
Yeah. So I probably should have maybe in the question clarified a little. I don't know.
That's all right. So, hey, sometimes the open-ended nature is what gets the debate going. Yeah. Yeah. No, I love it.
I'd love to have a Big 12 trophy. Yeah. You're not going to upset me with that. I promise.
You ain't lying.
Yeah. But I do think that, I don't know. I think TCU, I don't view them on any level as an outsider. I don't view them on any level in the same category as Washington or Cincinnati. Had Washington upset Alabama, I'd still remember that.
I completely agree with you. I just don't
I'd
think
still remember that.
I don't think the general I think the general public remembers TCU just like
I
they
don't
do
remember who
Cincinnati and
Alabama
Michigan
beat
State and
in that
whoever
championship
and
game when they beat
Washington and
Washington. I don't know I don't remember who they beat. But I'll tell you this: had Washington beat
Clemson, I
Alabama,
Bleav.
maybe so. If you're playing the odds, okay. But had Washington beat Alabama, I would absolutely still
See,
remember
again,
that through and
I'm with
through
you,
and
and
through.
I'm with you, and I think as a fan, everyone agrees with that. Again, I'm just talking national perspective. All that people remember
Here's
about
what I think.
TCU last year is they got their doors smoked by Georgia. That's it.
I'll leave
That's
it
all
with
they
this.
remember.
I'll leave it with this. It's not often we get to see the Giants Slade on the biggest of stages. It's not
If you got
often.
a 50-50
So
shot, give it to me.
that's not even what I'm talking about, Wes. What I'm saying is those rare times that you see the giant slayed by the underdog, David slays Goliath, the blue blood Michigan on the giant biggest of stages. They've clamored for this playoff opportunity. They've done this, they've done that. Jim Harbaugh. When you beat a Michigan team like that, when you beat an Ohio State in the most meaningful of games, when you beat an Alabama, when you beat a Clemson, those are very hard to forget because they're so rare. And because of that, that's why I think people remember TCU did that.
Buddy, I am with you. I just don't think the general populace is romantic
Right,
about college football as we are. But we'll
do you
leave it
think
there
you
for
remember
now.
if Washington beat Alabama
Would I have? Would I?
in a playoff game?
Oh,
Do
I
you
would
think the
because
average person would
college
remember
football.
Nick Saban
I,
lost a playoff game to Washington? I
the
think they
average
might,
person, no, I don't think they would. I don't think
because
they
it's not
would.
like losing a bowl game to Utah. It's a whole different animal. This is a playoff game.
5 years from now, 10 years from now, 5 years from now, I think if you ask again, not someone who's romantic about college football as we are, the average sports fan, who did TCU beat before they went and lost to Georgia? I bet you 20% of people, again, only the
How about if you
hardcore
frame the
sports
question like
fans
this?
would
You
remember.
remember that playoff game with TCU and Michigan?
Now there you go. Now
See? They remember that.
that might
You know
do
what I'm
it. That
saying?
that
Because right
might do it.
now, if you say, you remember that playoff game with Alabama and Cincinnati? No, no.
Like
You remember the playoff game
I think
with
people,
Alabama and
hey,
Washington?
remember
No, not really.
remember when Boise State upset Oklahoma and they went for two and the trick
Now,
play
just
and they won.
imagine, Wes,
But
if
I
that
think
was a
people
playoff
cared.
game.
But that's what I mean. I think people cared more about the non-national championship game before we
Well, back
introduced
then,
the playoff.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Fast forward and take Boise doing that in a playoff game against Oklahoma. And I think it's what you got, which people remember anyway, because it was so big back then. It's that on steroids.
Complete.
So
I'm
again, if
with
you
you
ask
on that.
somebody, do you remember the Alabama Washington playoff game? There's no way they're going to remember that. But had Washington beat Alabama? Hey, you remember that Washington Alabama? Oh yeah. I remember seeing Nick Saban one of those few times he stubbed his toe. Oh yeah, that never happens. I remember. Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no,
But
I
I
listen.
agree.
I don't think you're crazy or anything
Clemson,
like that. Yeah,
that wouldn't be very meaningful. But
no, absolutely.
fun time.
Final thank you to our friends at Fortis for roof performance and financial security. Visit fortis.us.com. Jed, we're pushing an hour here already, so we'll wrap this up. But before we do, we need some updates on our buddy Skyler and how he's doing. And of course, we need another tease about old Rich Rod, who's going to be joining the podcast, holding the rope, holding the podcast here shortly.
Again, we talked about the future and the role that Skyler's going to have. Skyler Callahan as part of the program. In a production role, sometimes in front of the camera. He's kind of a jack of all trades. We're really excited about him bringing his brand over here. We talked last week that unfortunately he and his family were in this accident. It was a harrowing accident. I talked to him about it yesterday, and his wife's had surgery, so there's a road to recovery here. But he was in the car and he had his computer with him, and it was a dangerous situation. His computer's laptop was destroyed, so that's going to take a handful of weeks to replace it. So right now he's kind of down and out from an equipment standpoint. He's having to limp along on another work computer, and so he's still able to post some stuff on his side, but it'll be a few weeks before he merges with what we're doing. But they're getting there. They're getting there. I mean, this could have turned out a lot worse than it did. So prayers up for Skyler and his family. That was
absolutely
that was a scary situation that he walked me through. So we're very glad it turned out much more favorably than it could have. And Rich and I are texting back and forth. I had some phone issues yesterday, as you and Owen know. I had some phantom texts not come through. So we're trying to work out times and dates in the next week or two, and we're going to have a lot of fun getting Coach Rod on here to kind of tell, some old war stories with Owen and I.
Absolutely.
We can jab each other and see where that goes. And we're going to have some fun with that.
It's going to be a fun July, and that's going to roll us right into August and things getting going with camp and looking ahead to the regular season. So yeah, buckle up. Plenty to get to here right around the corner. We're excited to get Skylar involved. Still hoping for all the best in the recovery for him, his dad, his wife. And yes, we will all be holding the rope here and telling some good stories. Which, like I said a week ago, when we have Rich on here, I'm just going to introduce the thing, do the sponsor reads, and I'm just going to let Jed and Owen and Rich tell some stories and shoot the breeze. So it'll be a lot of fun. We know you guys will enjoy it. Thanks for rocking and rolling and sticking with us the entire off season. And as always, one final thing that we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
But I got to ask, Wes, do I sound okay? Remember I asked you a couple weeks ago, my mic felt like it was off a little.
Sounds fine to me.
I want to point this out because I love these kind of comments. So there was a comment on the YouTube page. I don't know if you saw it or not.
Oh yeah, about the volume. Yeah,
about my volume. Well, here's what I liked about it. I had was it a red hat? What color? It was a yellow. I had my yellow hat, my yellow ITG hat on, and whoever it was piped in says, "Tell Yellow Hat to fix his microphone."
That's right. Tell Yellow Hat to fix his microphone.
Nothing makes me laugh harder. Like I'm standing in line at the grocery store and I hear somebody say, "Hey, mustache, come here." Those types of comments, I'm a big fan. So, hey, first, thanks for pointing out
all the time. Hey, baby face, come here.
I love it. So anyway, I had to point that out. Thanks for the jab. And that was good stuff.
Yeah, we'll make sure we're normalizing our audio levels before we post this one. I listened back and I thought everything sounded fine, but if Yellow Hat's microphone was not loud enough, I do apologize. Blame the producer who's oh wait, that's me. I can't blame Skylar for another couple weeks. Come on, baby face, get the volume levels.
Come on, baby face. Come on, 16.
16, I'll take that. I got 12.
It's a jersey number. We're talking about an age. Yes.
Thanks everybody for listening. Skylar, Rich Rod, a bunch of fun stuff coming at you soon. For Owen Schmitt and Jed Drenning, I'm Wesley Uhler. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the 4th. Enjoy the holiday. Be safe if you're traveling around.
Happy 4th.
And happy 4th, everybody. And we'll talk to you soon. You've been in the gun.